Hello, we're delving back into Superman. Welcome to the HolmFront. Welcome. I am Tyler, your host, and to my right, as always, is my overly artistic friend, Mitch.
Hello.
I've also been thinking we should start calling ourselves high-functioning artists, only because it's funny. So,
Okay.
do you have anything to announce? It's been a second. Do you
No.
Nothing. Okay, so Oscarinas is on hold for now. Your personal channel, nothing's coming out in the near future that you need to announce. That
Well, it's hard because it's YouTube time.
it is YouTube time.
So by the time people watch this, there could be like a new video on my channel.
That's
there
fair,
could be,
yeah.
like new things. I'm working on stuff. Put it that way.
Anything? I guess you could just give a date, like if you had a date set in mind when you're releasing something. I should have asked beforehand, but
Oh.
unless you don't. If you don't, then I just figured I'd let you.
Well, yeah. I
announce it
guess
if you
I give
do.
you a little preview. Like I'm doing a sort of a comparative episode with Super Metroid and Metroid Dread. So if you know anything about those games, Metroid Dread was like a kind of it revitalized the series and brought it back into the public consciousness. And great game, but I did a nice comparative contrast episode where I'm comparing that with the Super Metroid, which is like an all-time classic. And so that's what I'm working on right now. I want to get it done before January is up. So if does this go up before January?
No, this will be in February probably.
Oh, it's
But
it's probably up.
But hey, go check his channel. It'll probably be there by the time this releases. There
Yeah.
you go.
It's probably like an hour and a half. I think I just did the recording here, so my voice is a little burnt out, but
We'll make
I'll
sure
make
to
it.
ruin it for the rest of the evening. Okay, cool. So we
Thanks.
got Metroid, February. Go check his channel out. It'll
More
be
game
linked
stuff.
below. Okay, so
What are we talking about today, though? What's the actual topic of the conversation?
we because you guys didn't see the thumbnail at all. So we're gonna talk about Superman. We're gonna talk about Superman, a specific iteration of him. Since I thought James Gunn is coming out with his new version, which apparently is gonna have this whole DCEU, and I've been trying to pay attention to like what they're doing with it, and there have been talks, and it seems like it's leaning towards the negative. Thank God that they are not going to pull in Robert Pattinson's Batman into that DC universe.
That's a good choice.
Great choice. Please don't mix them. But yeah, since that's coming out, I figured, well, we can watch this one since
Man of Steel.
we really liked the Man of Steel depiction of Superman.
Yeah, it's a great movie.
And then maybe I'll subject you to the Christopher Reeves films soon.
Sure. Well, yeah. Let's
Products
actually,
of the time.
This
for
is
sure.
technically a Rotten Tomatoes episode, or
This
a
is
Rotten
this
Disparity.
is a rotten disparity.
Okay, so let's see the disparity then.
So the disparity
Is
is
57%
almost
critics.
20%. So I'm breaking a rule here, but
Okay.
because I figured 20% is a good like base, but
Yeah.
this is a pretty big disparity considering the film and the quality of the film, in my opinion.
Yeah.
So this is the time that you're gonna have to defend it.
Yeah. Well, only partially, because my team definitely speaks a lot better than yours.
Should we do this first or should we do this last?
I
Well, I
think we
guess
should
if
do
we're
it
showing the
first.
score, we should just do it now, huh?
Yeah, I think we should.
Okay, so I decided that at first I thought we would choose like 3 from the critics and 3 from the audience that we would find as like favorites, and we just have them.
actual people reviews.
But we went through a bunch of specifically the audience reviews, and my gosh, you guys, like if you're gonna write a review of a movie, please try like. Use a couple. You go to the dictionary and learn a couple words, and then try. Like, so okay. So let's just read them.
Okay, so are you going to start with audience or critic?
Yeah, we're starting the audience. It's way more entertaining. So I'm gonna start with Mr. Professional D here.
That's his name. Okay, Professional D.
Not professor. Professional D.
Okay.
Not a really bad movie.
Does that mean it's good or bad?
I don't know. what it means. I don't know what that means. Not a really bad movie. I've never heard someone describe a movie that way.
If it's not a
Like
really bad one, then
right.
it could be a very bad one. Well, no, it couldn't be that.
Well,
It
where
could be
does
still
really?
a bad,
Where
like a
does
semi-bad.
where does really land? Before or after very? Like what? I don't know what your standard is, sir. So let's go back. Let's see. The Superman for bros, not for genuine Superman fans. I don't know what that
For
means
bro?
either.
What does it mean by bros?
I don't know. What does that mean?
It's really hard to, because I can't even argue. I don't even know if you liked it or not.
Right.
I'm just lost.
What does it mean to be for bro? Because Henry Cavill's like jacked in this movie? Is that like a gym bro? I don't know what that
Okay,
means.
Maybe.
But what's the difference between them and original Superman fans? This movie was great, but I hate the subtitle machine. We need the glasses back, not that cup holder thing.
Wait, what? What cup holder?
What
What is-
subtitle machine? Guys. Seriously.
I don't know
What
what to
is
say.
and this is all one sentence. Okay, Xena, I'm sorry, that was Ma4283 that said Xena L. Wow, Henry Cavill might just be the best Superman and the best costume design reimagined ever. Gold writing and dialogue, no words.
You just said a bunch of
used
words.
a lot of words just now. At least you used some commas and periods. I'll give her this.
Well, and at least I understand what it was that she liked about the movie. She liked Henry Cavill. She liked the costuming. So, like, okay, like at least I understand. Oh, but like the bar has changed. Now I just
Right.
want to know.
Yeah,
what did
least
you
that
like
was
about it?
Understandable sentence. All right, so let's do a critic or two.
Okay, well let me do the critics.
Yeah,
if
go
you
for
don't
it.
mind.
All you. I'm stalling here. So, yeah, again, these people, somehow they got onto Rotten Tomatoes in order to write reviews without knowing anything about writing a review. Like, and it's supposed to be short. I get that. But really, if you're going to write a sentence, make a good sentence. Like,
Yeah.
not a really bad movie. Don't write that.
You actually, I've written a couple of reviews actually, and you have a decent chunk of space.
Okay.
There was one where I kind of went off and I explained like, oh, like this movie's interesting.
Is this like
because
a
it did
tweet
this.
length, like a 900 character
I
type
think
thing?
so,
Okay.
something like that. But you have a decent amount of room. But it's like I'm not even asking for that. Just give me like
a point or two.
Yeah, just a point or two of like a
Like
fun.
a solid point, not a really bad movie.
Yeah, you could
I
say
don't know what that point is.
you could say like a dark, gritty interpretation of Superman. I liked it. Something like that is like, okay, very simplistic, but like at least I understand
Right.
what kind of movie I'm getting and that you
And
enjoyed
that
it
you
or
liked
not.
it, yeah.
It worked or didn't work for you. Okay, so let's take a look at some critic ones.
Uh-huh.
I'm going to pick out some that I like.
Yep.
So this is a positive one, and this is Tiana or
Yeah. Oh no, Tanya Hussein.
So her review is, and this is just the Spark Notes because they have longer ones that you can click for the full review. I'm just going to read the Spark Notes one. Man of Steel is a genre story without the cartoon-like elements seen in past superhero films, presenting a gritty, torment-ridden reboot of the character's origin story with intense emotional genuineness. I think
Agreed.
that's really apt. I think
Yeah.
that's a great way to describe this movie. And, you know, I get if you don't want that, you're not going to like it, but does it work effectively on that principle? I think it does, and I think a positive review is warranted there.
And I'd say that this is a fairly it doesn't really hold any opinion. Like, this is pretty generic, even though it seems to be fairly glowing terms, and obviously she has a good review tomato next to it. These are just terms to describe the movie without necessarily inserting her opinion, which I appreciate. It seems like she's actually trying to convey the movie in a synopsis rather than
Yes.
this is what I feel about it. It's like, okay, yeah, I
Yeah.
don't necessarily care, but thank you.
Yeah, because that's, I think, one difference is like when you're looking at audiences, they're just kind of giving you how they feel about it, which is totally fine because
Sure.
the idea is you get this short version of a bunch of people's takes. So
Right.
you just know overwhelming if everyone's like, wow, great movie or awesome film, see it on the big screen. You know, reviews like that are real straightforward, and you get a bunch of them, and you go, wow, this seems like something I really want to go see, just because there's
Right.
hype around it, right? So they're just generating hype. But like, yeah, for the critics, they have to kind of help you explain, like, all right, well, this is what the movie's trying to accomplish, and then I'm gonna provide an evaluation based on that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So here's another one by Corey Woodruff, or Woodruff. It says, Man of Steel, this is another positive one. Man of Steel was Snyder's triumphant debut with Superman, and it's still a thrilling example of why Clark Kent can be an engaging lead for one of these movies, despite the speculation for the opposite.
Yep.
Okay, let's try a negative one. Brian Eggert says, Snyder's film is humorless and flavorless, unmemorable and underwhelming, epic-sized but far from grand. What do you think of that?
I don't know what you mean by grand. These all seem like epic sized. Wouldn't I mean?
Well,
Yeah,
it's like when you go to Burger King.
that's how we rate films. Yeah, I mean, there actually was a little bit more humor than I thought there was. From the last time I saw this movie, and they all seem like fine to me. I mean, it's not riddled with jokes that pause the entire film like Marvel does. So I mean, if you're creating a standard based on Marvel films of the time, which they were fairly into it, because I think 2008
Yeah.
was Iron Man. This is 2013.
Yeah, we're right in the thick of Marvel territory.
So there has been a standard set, but as I've made at this point that I've made in the past, that DC has to be clearly different, distinct, in my opinion. Because it does have that darker tone, for one, but it also has these figures, which we'll get into in a bit here. It has these figures that tend to be, on average, a lot more iconic, specifically Spider-Man, or Superman. And so to me, it's like, well, yeah, but it has to have its own identity. And like, not only is it a DC identity, but it's a Snyder film.
Yeah.
And also you have Nolan in the background. So like, it's clearly going to have a lot of these darker overtones. So I don't know what he was expecting with this, but I don't understand the critique.
There's another one interesting by Grant Watson who says, here's the main problem. It's a solid movie, but a terrible Superman movie. So it seems like we're seeing a lot of sentiment.
Which actually, I have a point on that I want to get to after we do this. So remind me about that.
Yeah, I'm almost done here. I just want to get another negative on the field here. Which one was it?
The CGI Carnage one?
No, I was thinking, what was the one?
A pandering, monotonous mess that features an anachronistic character who may be best left a relic of the past.
Yeah, that one's David Harris. He seems to just be upset that they're making a Superman movie at all, which I don't think is really fair.
Well, and this actually lends to that point too. So I guess we'll just get into it now, because I wanted to wait.
Do it.
But so I didn't know what anachronistic meant, but apparently it just means that this is aged. Here's the thing about storytelling. One of the reasons why we do this channel, which I guess encapsulates that a little bit too, because we were talking about that earlier today, was that we want to try and give some kind of, I don't know, light into what artistic endeavor looks like, and how that's pervaded and what it can do, and the scope of it that seems to be ever widening. And I think that the thing about Superman specifically, and one of the things that we were learning as we went into this a little bit, because we actually did a little bit of research this time, was Superman tends to embody a lot of ideals. Oh yeah. It tends to embody a lot of ideals, specifically American ideals, on which not only the country was founded, but also what it ended up standing for later, specifically within any kind of conflict, world wars, etc. These tend to be themes that are pushed into Superman along with classic storytelling tropes, and so he kind of takes on his shoulders a lot of symbolism just in general, inherently. And I think that this actually, Man of Steel, is interesting because it not only embodies all those, but it also takes on like a more modern take of the character. So it almost kind of lends to its timelessness, which I was really experiencing this time watching it, was that they put in a couple of extra themes that are more, more akin to Snyder and Nolan, because Nolan had just come off of the Batman trilogy, so he was innately involved because he was part of DC at the time, or at least the DC properties as they existed. So his hand is all over it. His fingerprints are all over it. And then Snyder has a very specific style. And so the mixture of the two I thought was pretty fantastic. But when they took the Superman and they embodied all these elements and this symbolism, I thought it added to the character of what Superman used to be, but also bringing it into a modern light. And then it lends to things later in the film that most people tend to disagree with, at least that I've spoken to myself. But are things that I actually tended to like about the movie because it tended to be pretty bold with some of its choices, especially with a Superman film, which tends to be what these critiques are pushing towards.
What are the people you've talked to? What have they said about this movie that they don't like? Maybe they have a better explanation than what the internet can provide.
That's fair. So one is that Superman is supposed to be the ideal, right? So he's the one kind of similar to Batman that he doesn't kill. He like strives because he has to maintain a level of control considering how powerful he is, and so he has to constantly be holding back. So one of the things that comes through this movie is that they basically level all of the city,
right?
All of Metropolis. But outside of that, he kills Zod in the end, and he makes a conscious decision to end a life, right? And so that's not what Superman's supposed to be or supposed to stand for. So it stands completely counter to the idealistic version that Superman's supposed to be.
Okay.
But I thought, like, not only is it a modern retelling, but also they're taking creative license, but at the same time, like, it's bringing it into a new universe, and it's not just retelling the same story over and over. Because you've got Christopher Reeve's Superman, you've got all the comic books, there's plenty of other versions of Superman where this one, they just tried to take a bit of a risk, and I thought it paid off. Apparently, other people disagree.
Comic book characters, and I would venture to say video game characters as well, are a little bit more malleable than like literary characters, I think. I think you can do iterations of them. And I'm not really sure what the justification I would use is, other than to say that, like, for some reason we attribute more like permanency to a literary character. If they're written in a book, that is that character, and it's very
Never
hard.
change.
Yeah, that's kind of like it becomes the definitive statement. I mean, but you could also equate something like sometimes you get an example that's just so emblematic of the character and it captures them exactly, and everybody sort of latches onto that version, and then no other version really compares, or they have to be compared, or they have to be compared to that version, right? They have to try to live up to that new standard.
Sure.
So I wonder if maybe that's part of what's going on. But for some reason, I guess I mean, I am very much with you on this movie. I think it's great. I think it seems like, based on what we were researching, and like, we've not read the Superman comics, so if there's like a diehard person out there who's read them all, then yeah, you're going to see things in this movie that don't add up with it. But like, we're like big picture stuff, right? Superman's like iconography as like, the embodiment of America. You said that as like a world power because he's just like so unbelievably strong. And then the weight of responsibility that inevitably puts on him. So that's like a really prevalent theme, which appears in this. And then him being like a Christ-like figure also comes through. Because the interesting thing is when you're comparing like the white savior narrative, Dances with Wolves, Avatar, Last Samurai, Pocahontas. These movies is always like, some white guy goes to like this other culture and then he learns their culture and then he kind of like finds like a deeper appreciation for life or whatever, and he switches sides. That's like, and he kind of saves them from his own people or whatever. But this isn't that, because Superman is he's more like the biblical Christ because he's an outsider and he has these like powers that make him like basically like a god to these people, and so he has to grow up with these, this like a greater responsibility and kind of have to find his way throughout that. But that it's like I didn't like Superman before this movie. This is getting into like my backstory, my tragic backstory.
Tragic, yep. He's a supervillain. We're about to get the the reason why he's the way he is.
But I've never really liked the character up until I saw this movie, and it wasn't a very thoughtful response. I just didn't have any investment in him. I was just like, whatever. They just seem like generic, like, red and blue, save the day kind of guy. I mean, I like the cartoon, I guess, well enough. I liked Lois Lane. I liked Supergirl. But I wasn't like a diehard fan or anything. And then I saw this movie, and it just humanized him so much. It became so much more relatable. Like that scene, where he's a kid and he's like seeing, X-ray vision, and you can see everybody's like skeletons and their organs and stuff, and hearing their thoughts. Like that's terrible for a kid to have to go
Sure.
through. But it was kind of a nice representation to visually show like the kind of overwhelming and the strangeness and the othering that he would have gone through. So it's like if people don't like that because it's not Superman, I get it, but also it's like what did you? It's almost like it seems like to me like people who are upset that Batman isn't his 1960s version with like the purple and the yellow
Yeah,
and
Adam
the
West with the
bomb.
bomb.
Yeah, Adam West with the bomb over his head. Look out, Robin!
Give
Like
me the shark spray.
Batman's too dark. He needs to look like that version.
Sure.
It's like what?
Right, because they're supposed to embody ideals that transcend a single character, right? That's why you have so many iterations
Yeah.
of Batman or Superman, or that's why these characters are more of a. Well, I mean, Batman, I guess, embodies it the best because it's a symbol, right? He's supposed to like the cape and the cowl are supposed to conceal his identity, so anybody could wear them.
Mm,
Same thing with like Spider-Man or whatever. It's anybody can take on these set of ideals
yeah.
and embody them. So I thought, yeah, mixing in these elements that they had already broken down enough and then added in their own creative liberties with Man of Steel, I thought just more well-rounded the character as I knew him at least, and apparently you do it as well, and then put it into a more modern narrative while still retaining a lot of the idealism that he stood for. I mean, the original debut is 1938, and so
Okay.
that time of American history, there was something to which kids could look up and be like, oh, okay, there's something tangible that we can see that's like the American ideal, right? I mean, obviously we can't jump over buildings in a single bound and, look up there as a bird or plane and you can fly around or whatever. But he's like the
He's somebody
embodiment
hopeful.
of goodness and something that can go and fight evil, and be brave in the face of adversity, that kind of thing. But also, aside from like a personal way of embodying that, he's also, in my opinion, he seems to embody like the American superpower. He's something that can go and destroy, but he holds back. He's someone with self-control, with a moral compass in order to not do that. But I think when you look at it in that way, when you get to Man of Steel, when he kills Zod, he's kind of faced with a decision of like, he either allows Zod to commit evil or he does something, he's forced into a corner, essentially. And I think that also embodies kind of, I know we're jumping into this political territory that might get us in some hot water, but when you get into that territory where you're faced with evil and there's something you have to do in order to stop it that may conflict with your moral idealism, at some point you've got to take a stand. You've got to take a step. And he took that step, and I thought that was interesting to the character. It was like, yeah, well, what else is he going to do? He can't let these people die. I mean,
Yeah.
say what you will about basically leveling the entirety of Metropolis, but at a certain point, it's like being thrown around with Zod is one thing. Making a conscious decision to kill someone is a different thing.
Yeah.
And so him making that conscious decision for the greater good I thought it was an interesting decision.
Well, it's narratively very sound because everything Zod does is for the greater good, for
Right.
Krypton. So when Superman does that, it's because the villain forced him into the position to have to take a stand like
Right.
that.
What
And
is
that-
the actual greater good according to him?
Right. And Superman didn't want to do that, but that is where real growth happens. And the thing about what people seem to like about the old Superman is that he's just like this icon you look up to and he solves all your problems or whatever. I mean, he's like God, but like this is like the Jesus version that he's doing.
Sure.
Where it's like there's the man part too.
Right.
And the man is going to be conflicted because that humanity is something that we understand and relate to. So us being, millennials, sorry to age you on live television.
Thanks, yeah.
But I think that resonates with us in particular. I wonder if that's partly where some of this disparity comes in where some of the critics maybe are a little bit older, and I just kind of wonder about that, because normally I'm actually pushing back against like millennial writing and pushing back against like the modernization of stuff.
Sure.
But in this case, it was like,
Well, they mixed the two really well. Like they still
yeah,
held a very classic, idealistic version of Superman, while trying to add in more of like the relatable nature
yeah.
that came through the film.
Well, and the other thing about that scene that's so powerful is that when he kills Zod, he is destroying Krypton.
Right.
Like
He's destroying his original homeworld that he doesn't know.
right. And so he's saying like my past is like nothing anymore. And that's very much related to Americans as well, because Americans are immigrants by their very nature, because we're the only country in the world where it's like our nationality and our ethnic background, they're not one and the same.
Sure.
So it's like you can come from anywhere and potentially be an American, because it's
And we
it's
did, and then
we did,
cast off the the shackles of the
right,
British Empire at the time. But
right,
yeah, I mean, that kind of embodies that. If you want to read that much more into a cultural aspect of Superman.
yeah. And I'm not saying Zack Snyder was like thinking about all these things. I'm just saying that like this stuff, these movies, this one in particular, always felt like it fit well with the ideas of Superman and what the character was about. I understood that like it has the Zack Snyder tone and style over it,
Yeah.
and it's got the Christopher Nolan dark grittiness. Everyone goes, I don't know, there's no color. Like, I'm tired of arguing with you about that. It fits the tone for this movie, though. It fits the direction what they're doing
I always
here.
love this style. I don't. Okay, I've not heard that critique.
Well, people feel like it's color. That people complain a lot about DC movies as being just like colorless and humorless, and it's like it's not a comedy show, and it's
Right.
not a Marvel movie. And that sounds like a slight, but like DC is kind of like they have like Batman and Superman up here,
Right.
and then there's like this huge gap, and then you have like you have like a bunch all the Marvel stuff basically all in like one big mess. But then you have like Spider-Man, Captain America, and like the X-Men kind of at the top of that. And then you can drop Blow, and then you've got everything else that DC does.
Yeah, DC does have quite
like
the highs
Suicide
and the
Squad.
lows.
Way down here.
I mean, that would be interesting, actually, go into stuff like Wonder Woman and kind of figure
Wonder
out
Woman's
the
pretty
tier. And she embodied a lot of things too. I think she.
Yeah.
I forget where she showed up, but I mean, it was somewhere around women's rights and all that kind of stuff. Probably 60s, 70s, I'd imagine, is where she shows up.
Well,
initially.
yeah, I feel like she shows up in World War II as well, along with like
Does
Captain
she?
America.
We'll have
Yeah.
to look that up later. But yeah, I
Mhm.
mean, obviously, they embody stuff outside of just the fun comics that they're in.
Right.
There's artistic merit to what they're embodying. And I thought that this film did a good job of honoring what Superman stood for in the past and what he can stand for now with, more modern relevance.
Agreed. I also think that when people want Superman to be like he was, it's like, are you telling me you want it to be like the kind of propaganda they would do in the 40s to make people feel better about World
Sure.
War II?
Get
Because
those
I feel like
Disney
you don't
propaganda
actually
films.
want that. You know what I mean?
Maybe.
Like that's not really we don't really make our entertainment like that anymore. We just flat out don't.
Well, the thing about it is, though, is how much artistic merit is that? Because that is a current relevance that might
Right.
not age. Whereas something
It doesn't
like,
because we're not at war.
well, there's that, but also at war with a specific nation or a
Right.
specific ideology. These artistic standards or endeavors are supposed to be something that transcends that. And I think a lot of the idealism that's found within Superman does tend to transcend that, and that's why this film was able to be made the way it is, and not only embody the old things but bring in some of the new. But also, again, it still transcends like American idealism, the classic man. And anyway,
Yeah.
okay, so barring all that, let's jump into the film itself. So it starts
Okay.
off with some fairly interesting dystopian themes. We'll go over it real quick because it's pretty brief, but they take some creative liberties. We looked up to see how closely it follows the original story, and we couldn't find enough to tell us if this is based on a specific set of comics or if this is more something that they came up with themselves. Because obviously Krypton does get destroyed. Like that is
Yeah.
original, and that's why Superman's sent to Earth. This one, it adds a little bit more depth to it. They're basically destroying their own planet based on some decisions that they're making. They're harvesting like the core of the planet because they're running out of some kind of energy on the surface or whatever. And so there's two competing ideologies that come with that. And there's Jor-El's, who I think is supposed to be like a scientist or something. But the interesting thing about it is that they set up the fact that Jor-El is bred to be something specific in the society. And then you have Zod, who's like the general. He's the lead of the armies of Krypton, and he's bred for that. So they have like these pods where they pull out the babies, and then they assign them some kind of responsibility
Yeah.
/ job, and that's what they're raised to do. And so Jor-El's ideology is that Krypton's lost. We're done. We just need to send something out in order to create a new Krypton so that our people will survive. Whereas Zod still thinks that there's some kind of hope, so he comes through and starts butchering these politicians and bureaucrats and just saying, we got to get rid of these guys that have been making these destructive decisions and try and reformat everything. So you have the two competing ideologies there. That all is fairly interesting and fairly reminiscent of something like Brave New World or, any number of dystopian stories. And then you have Superman. So within this narrative, they bring up this concept that natural birth is not something that's been done in centuries on Krypton. But Jor-El and his wife Laura have, and that is Kal-El, in whom they put the codex of Krypton, which is apparently, I guess it's like a DNA or something of the Kryptonians. They implant it into Kal-El, because that's what they use to create the babies in their chamber or whatever. That one's not super expounded upon, so I'm kind of grasping here. But they put it into Kal-El and send him off to Earth in order to save their people and to save their son. And then the planet dies, and Zod's sent to the Phantom Realm where he sits until he's freed.
Well, yeah, it's like wait a minute. He's supposed to be out there for 300 years, but it doesn't last that long.
No, so the timeline is a little bit screwy.
It is space, though.
They send him out there. Yeah, I mean, depending on how scientific they got with all this, but I mean, Christopher Nolan was involved, so maybe.
I know.
He's like, I got this idea for a movie. It's called Interstellar, but we can use some of the concept here. Anyway, so they imprison Zod and his companions and send him out into the Phantom Realm. And then it's not really clear how long it takes before Krypton itself dies. It explodes. And when it explodes is when Zod is freed. And then he starts exploring the universe for all the ships that Krypton had sent out over the centuries, picks up a bunch of stuff, and then finds Kal-El.
Yeah.
Anyway, okay, so I've kind of synopsized all that. Is there anything you wanted to say on the dystopian themes, or are you okay with it?
No. I mean, it looked cool.
It did look really cool. Yeah, I will say the CGI, the themes, and everything in this, everything looks stellar. Like it looks great. And it aged pretty well, too. For 2013, 11 years or whatever, it looks pretty fantastic still.
For people who can tolerate black and white movies.
Yeah, it is colorless and humorless, unfortunately. Not a really bad movie, though. Okay, so we went over that.
Okay, so what do you like about this movie?
What do I like? Casting's great. Henry Cavill's fantastic. I think he's a really good choice.
Agreed.
You can tell it's really early in his career. He's not fully like secure in himself in some scenes. You can tell it kind of bleeds through, but he's great. Russell Crowe's great. His mom, I can't remember her name. I'll look her up later.
Something Lane.
Yeah, something Lane.
Jane Lane or something like that.
She's great. The only cast, well, we'll get into that later.
Well, and Michael Shannon's awesome.
Oh yeah, Shannon's fantastic. You can tell he's having a blast. Like he is loving that role, and he comes through. Like he brings a lot. He's like a Willem Dafoe in Spider-Man.
Yeah,
he's just got that great dichotomy.
Yeah.
And he brings a great dichotomy to both. To Russell Crowe's character, who's Jor-El.
Yeah.
They have a really great chemistry on scene because you can tell there's a mutual respect there, and it really bleeds through the characters. But also the conflict between how they want to resolve the situation, that's great. And then choreography between their fight is fantastic. But then it's not pure hatred, but he kind of just develops this severe apathy towards Kal-El or Superman because he just knows, like, I just have to harvest Krypton out of you. There's no reason to develop any kind of relationship. Like, we're just here to to get you. At first, it's not because he doesn't realize that the codex is in there. But then when he figures it out, like it's just like, sorry, you're just you're a piece of meat that's gonna get harvested, and then we're gonna build Krypton on your bones.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, he's got like this sociopathic nature to him. That's great. He does a great job with it.
And it harkens back to the sort of so they do this breeding on Krypton to make everybody follow suit with like a certain philosophy. They assign so they make him this warrior,
right?
And that's what he's always saying. And then they're upset that the warrior turns on them,
right?
But
his main objective is to save and preserve Krypton,
right?
And they're destroying it. So he's just following his directive,
right?
But they're mad that they're the one destroying it, so he's turning his ire on them. They're like, "How could you? You're a monster!" And like, you made him.
You made him that way. This is
your fault.
It's apropos. What did you expect?
Yeah, he's doing his job pretty good, I thought.
Yeah, the thing about this movie that I really like too is it's just very visually engaging.
Yes.
People just criticize Zack Snyder so much, and he does have his fans, and I feel like his fans are like, I get why they like him, and they're willing to forgive some of the story beats that maybe they don't agree with, just because, like, for one, like, the action is just so visceral and so intense. So he does a great job with that. But it's also just like, on the whole, the movie's like whole visually like stimulating. Like, there's this really cool shot where it's like you see Clark Kent as a kid, and he's like playing with the family dog, and he's got the cape, and then he kind of, he does the Superman stance, and his like cape's blowing in the wind or whatever. And, going back to sort of the Christ narrative thing, in the book of Genesis, it talks about how humans have dominion over the earth.
Yeah.
And, watching that moment, I was like, oh, that's like a cool, like, visual representation of like
dominion over the earth.
Yeah, you have dominion over the earth of like the animals and the life on it. But that's also like where that sense of pride and, personal dignity comes into play, is like, wow, like this is something that I get to care for.
Sure.
So because that's the thing, is like Superman does deeply care for humanity. And it's something that, and he feels awful about killing Zod for just a multitude of reasons. And it's like, as the conversation goes, we just keep adding one. So here's another. It's like, he's watching a man who like can't fulfill his destiny anymore, and he has to deprive him of that.
Yeah.
And he's like, I don't want to do that to a person, but what choice do I have?
Right.
He's focused on all out genocide. I can't allow that. Like, this is just, and it's not actually that dissimilar from, like the eugenics and the genocide that the Nazis were doing, of the Jewish people. And, so it's like, again, I'm not saying that this movie is like a total recreation of all the themes that Superman does perfectly, but I just feel like there's nice little hints in there. And like, you have that scene where he's in the water and he's like kind of in the Christ image, which everybody always wants to criticize. They're just like, oh, it's just like so on the nose. Well, it's like he represents Christ. Like, what do you want them to do? Like, try to like hide it or like conceal it? Like, it's not like it lingers for 20 minutes and you're just like, okay, I get it. Or they're like, you're, Clark, you're kind of like this man from this book, and then like going through, it's like, it doesn't do that. Like, what did you want? Like, it's part of the story.
Well, the thing about that particular point also is that it also represents the rebirth of a character.
Yeah.
Specifically within the hero's journey, it's very common to go through, a submersion in water and to come back. But I mean, that's also symbolic of like baptism within the Christian faith, or there's different things in there. But I will say this one is a lot less on the nose than the subsequent two films.
Okay.
Like Batman vs Superman, for instance. Like that one's got like, boy, it is like out there. It's like, I got it. It's like, it's a Christ narrative. I understand. Thank you. This one seems like, I wouldn't say it's subtle, but it's more subtle than the other two.
Yeah, I don't know that it's subtle, but it's thematically relevant. So I'm fine with it.
It doesn't pause the whole movie and like beat you over the head with it. It's just kind of like a way of showing you what he's trying to convey. And it really doesn't, I don't know, it didn't stand out to me that bad. I mean, you can have your problems with comparing him to Christ but like at the same time, it's Zack Snyder. But like the guy is, if nothing else, not subtle. That is Zack Snyder. Like that is his style. I don't know. I have not heard too many critiques of the film. Like I understand the classic version of Superman and how that was, desecrated, quote unquote, but I don't know. I thought this was great.
Well, one comment you brought up while we were talking about the movie, it was like, man, Zack Snyder, his movies are so intense. He has so much action and so much explosions. I was like, how come he doesn't get the same? Like, how come I don't feel out of breath like I do when I'm watching J.J. Abrams? You're like, well, he'll give you a moment to pause. And, that's one of those moments where he's just in the water and then he flashes back to this childhood scene.
Yeah.
And you kind of connect with the character and then you come back. And it's like, how nice that was.
Also, they don't run from scene to scene. Like, it's not constant
Sometimes people
running.
walk.
Sometimes they walk, or sometimes they fly. It's jeez, freaking Abrams.
Yeah, we're gonna have to talk about him someday. But yeah, I also feel like, there's other moments too. Like there's one with Zod where he pulls off his helmet and then he's like trying to adjust to like the atmosphere and the sunlight or whatever. And
okay. So there's a scene before that. Before you get into that, so when it's the scene where he goes to Martha's farm, to Superman's mom, and basically is like, "Where's the ship?" And so they're intimidating his mother, and then Superman flies through and he's just beating the crap out of him. Like, think you can mess with my mom? And like throws him across the gas station, and it explodes. It messes with his mask, and so then he starts getting the full brunt of the sensory overload. And then dealing with the Earth's atmosphere.
Yeah.
And so he can't take it. So he basically gets pulled out of the fight because he's rendered incapacitated.
Okay, I missed that part.
So, but Superman explains, he's like, I've had my entire lifetime and my parents teaching me how to deal with this. You got nothing. So run home with your tail between your legs. So then when Zod comes with this scene, he's already aware of what that is, but he's like, I've got to figure this out and adapt. Otherwise, I'm going to lose.
Right.
And so he comes in and turns his mask off and deals with the sensory overload and then adapts instantly.
Yeah.
And it's a testament to who he is as a disciplined warrior.
Yeah.
To like adapt to your environment or, figure out.
Well, and he's bred to be able to do this stuff. He has all the training or whatever.
Yep.
So that adds to his credibility of like, well, Kal-El is just this weird offshoot of a person because he was natural born or whatever.
Right.
But I was just pointing out, like, it's a nice moment where he like looks at his hand and then like the film just really like, I guess he seems to concentrate. It feels like Snyder like will concentrate on the moment and be like, this is the moment I want you to have right now.
Yeah.
And then all the attention gets put into that. And it just feels like he pours himself into it. Like one thing I was noticing is there's a lot of shots that I really like. They don't always connect nicely, though. And sometimes he has these kind of weird, choppy shots in between them. So it's almost like what he'll do is he sets up a specific shot, and it's like really cool. And he'll, explain it to everyone what he wants for the vision. And he'll like put all this energy into it and all this cool effects. And you see it and you go, wow, that was awesome. And then he has like some other ones that are like, well, that's all right. It's passable. And then that kind of, but then he gets back into his flow again, and then it picks up speed. Like when he's in a fight scene, you don't notice it as much because, the fight scene is just awesome. But when it's cutting to like the people in the street, it's like, what is this shot? It's just like people walking or they're just running from a collapsing building.
This
and then
have
that's
always
it.
stood out to me. Like, there's one specifically where they're just laying waste to Metropolis, like I said. And then it just stops and looks at these people like kind of hiding behind cars, and they kind of like peek their heads up. It's like, why aren't you running? What do we have to do with this? Run away. Why are you guys all standing here? But it's a weird moment. Yeah, you're right. It does have those kind of odd standout, like, that was weird, but all right, back to the fight.
It's an interesting example of maybe Zack Snyder is best when he is off the leash, which I never thought I would say because he's such a, like, he just is such a...
That's not true because there's a couple of films to exemplify what he does off the leash. Anyway.
Well, but I mean that they become more, like there's no jarring nature to them. So they're more... What are you thinking of? What movie?
Golden Army of the Dead.
I have not seen that one.
Yeah, I know you haven't.
Okay.
And then there's Rebel Moon.
Oh, you're thinking of his... So hold on.
I'm thinking of...
I'm going back.
Okay.
I'm going back to like Sucker Punch.
Okay.
And I've not seen Sucker Punch in a really long time, but Sucker Punch felt like a movie where every frame was just the way that he wanted it.
Yeah, fair.
And it was nice and smooth throughout.
300 probably has the same
Probably, yeah.
style.
And I
Yeah.
remember them just being visually like
Yeah.
nice to just flow through.
I will say,
yeah.
whoever I don't know if you'd say choreographer or whatever, because obviously you choreograph the Batman fight, but I don't know how you choreograph a Superman fight. I guess, yeah, you just gotta like map that thing out somehow. But whoever does his action work in general he is masterclass.
Yeah.
Like the action scenes in Man of Steel and in Batman v Superman are top notch. Top notch.
And and he does not get enough credit for it. It's so annoying
Right.
to me. Because I mean, it's like these are like gods to these people.
Right.
So when they're flying around and like boom, and then they go and then just crash into buildings, it's just total destruction. It's like, wow, that's basically what it would be. I mean, none of this like Iron Man whatever nonsense, you know.
Using that to jump in screw Marvel.
Well, it's just like it's a different kind of tone, right?
Oh,
I mean, not
gotcha.
even Hulk is doing this level of destruction because it doesn't fit the theme as well. But with
Sure.
Superman, it's like they would have to lay it on. They're like, hey, you don't understand. These Kryptonians, they're not like people. Because if Superman is going to be in any way related to Christ, he's going to have to be like literally unstoppable. Like there's
Right.
nothing humanity can do to stop this thing.
Sure.
This man could destroy the whole planet if he really wants to.
Sure.
So, they have to demonstrate that visually. And I felt like they did that well.
Did.
And like one thing too about film is like that I've been trying to kind of be more appreciative because, I always like, the substance of the narrative and what they're trying to communicate. But I'm trying to be more open to just like, is it like visually stimulating and engaging? And is there like substance just in that on an aesthetic level? And if like the movie lacks that, then even if the substance is good, it's like I'd kind of want the like if I've got a movie with good substance but crap visuals, I would rather take the movie with crap substance but good visuals almost. And I can think of a prime example, Spotlight. Good substance, boring movie, just utterly boring. We're going to have to do a whole episode on it someday. But the preview of it is that it's just so plain and just
that's fair.
unimaginative. It felt
You're
like
talking
a
about,
machine, like an AI shot the movie. It was just insufferable. I was like, maybe we could do a slightly different camera angle. Maybe.
Can I
just
get a Dutch
something.
angle in here somewhere? Anywhere.
Something. Maybe some different lighting to, convey a mood or something.
I will say, yeah, Snyder's definitely, he's got good mood to his films. I will say Christopher Nolan does too. I mean, I understand that maybe it's a little monochromatic sometimes, but I don't know. I've never had a problem with his mood. But I tend to like dark films, so maybe that's a me thing.
Yeah, but I also, I mean, I like those too, but I also like black and white. I have no problem with, like, if they just launch a new movie and it's black and white, I'll go see it. Like,
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm not against black and white. I think it looks beautiful in its own way. But the people that harp up on it, like, oh, there's no humor and it's just so colorless, I'm like, it's like you're ignoring the intentions of the film.
Make me laugh. Why?
The intention of the film is this darker, grittier interpretation of Superman.
And they got
Why
some
is
great
it
moments.
so wrong?
There was a moment in there, to go on the humor thing, there's a moment in there where Zod smacks him up against this sign, and the sign says 106 days since
Without-
last incident or whatever, without incident. And when he hits it, the 1 and the 6 come off, so it says 0. But it's really fast. He like smacks it and drops, and like the camera follows him, so you can almost miss it.
Yeah.
On the first viewing, but it's so subtle. It's like, that was funny. Some like special effects guy was just like, yeah, wouldn't that be? I'm just gonna throw it in there. I can. But like stuff like that, it's hilarious. It's because it doesn't pause the movie. That was one of the things I really liked, is that it doesn't be like, stop everybody, we're gonna tell a joke real quick, make sure we laugh. Back to the movie. It's like, oh. Like, I hate that in Marvel. So it makes me wonder if that's what the standard is that they're constantly holding it to. Because, at the same time as this being in the middle of Marvel, this also comes right on the heels of the Dark Knight trilogy.
Okay.
From Nolan, which is not a lot of humor in those movies. Like,
yeah, really not at all.
They're pretty dark and gritty themselves. So It's a weird critique. I don't know. I like the serious movie. I mean, if I wanted humor, then I'll just go watch a Marvel film.
Yeah, it's like I wonder if like do you think people would have liked this movie had Nolan directed it as well? Or do you feel like they just disagree fundamentally with
The
like
concept of it.
cuz that's what it sounds like they just disagree fundamentally with the concept. They just don't like that Superman is portrayed in this way and it's just wow, it's all wrong.
I don't know. Wouldn't that lend to the critics liking it more though, because it's kind of a bold, new take on something?
Yeah, you would think.
Yeah, because your crew is the one that dislikes this movie.
Yeah, well, critics can sometimes be really finicky because sometimes it seems like what they're trying to do is not even evaluate it so much as a film, but just like evaluate it for the audience that's going to go see it. So they will
Mm,
assess and be like, oh, Superman fans are going to hate this movie. Therefore, it movie bad.
maybe.
And I suppose that's valid on some level, but I think when you and I review it, we're typically looking just like is it like an enjoyable film?
Right.
Like I just want to know if I'm going to like it, if I recommend it, if like can I get into the story cuz it gets too hard to try to be not that like being faithfulness to your source material isn't important. It is, but also like there comes a point when it's like there's so many layers you have to go through. And so I'm willing to forgive changes if you're doing it for like an intended goal. And it just feels like Nolan and Snyder very much had a vision for this project. And that
Clearly.
vision comes through by the end of the movie.
But they're
So
also
I'm just like,
respectful
how
of the source material, in my opinion. I mean, aside from some of the
right.
deviances, but I mean, those, in my opinion, are creative liberties rather than, I don't know, blatantly disrespecting the source material.
Yeah, I mean, if Superman, spent his origin story in like a circus, like I don't see how that actually fits or is faithful
Sure.
to his, origin story. But if they wanted to play up into the themes of being an outsider and somehow made that work, like I don't see how you could.
What if they
But you get what I'm saying,
What if
right?
they mix the Batman and Superman narrative? So Jor-El and Laura both came to Earth with him, but somehow they get killed on the street in front of him. And he becomes an orphan and grows up into his powers.
And becomes a billionaire tycoon
Yep. But with Superman powers.
with Superman powers.
New comic idea, because no one has done that for sure.
What if it's at a theater and they're walking out from a
And
theater?
she's wearing pearls.
That could work.
Lex Luthor kills her with a kryptonite gun. So stupid. Can't even take myself seriously on this one.
All right, so should we talk about what we don't like about this movie? Because it's not all.
Well, the last thing that
rose.
I want to
Oh, okay.
definitely praise is Hans Zimmer's score.
Yeah, well, that goes without saying.
I figured we just Hans Zimmer does a score. Enough said.
The accompaniment is great, yeah,
Oh
because
my God.
he's constantly like when the tension's like revving up or when it slows down, Zimmer just flows nicely with Snyder.
Yeah, he handled that score. Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's go into what did we dislike. I'll start with you.
Lois Lane.
Lois Lane.
I don't dislike Amy Adams.
Amy
She's
Adams
fine.
is great, but
I actually like her hairdresser, weirdly enough.
Yeah.
I was just noticing, I was like, you know what? Her hair seems like the way it should look for Lois Lane. It's supposed to be black, but whatever. And I'm basing most of my interpretation just off of the cartoon show because I like the cartoon show when I was a kid.
That's fair.
But yeah, she's just like
She doesn't portray the plucky, sassy attitude. She's got more. She definitely has a chip on her shoulder.
yeah,
But it doesn't like come through in like the endearing way that the plucky reporter stereotype's supposed to embody. Specifically with Lois Lane.
Yeah.
She has some endearing qualities, I suppose, but she just did not land as Lois Lane. The unfortunate thing about Lois Lane is that it's kind of like Mary Jane. Like, it's a very specific character that we're trying to fill.
Yeah.
And if you don't get it, like, it's not going to land. And it didn't land, unfortunately. Because Amy Adams is a very talented actress. Like, she's doing a really good job. It does not come through as Lois Lane.
It's like her dialogue doesn't work. Her, like, just like, it just doesn't feel like they're doing anything to make her, like, Lois Lane is supposed to kind of command the room. Like, that's the whole idea, is that, like, Clark Kent does not command the room at all.
But he does that on purpose. So it's nice.
He does it on purpose.
It's nice for him to have someone that could be kind of his voice while he's not Superman. But then that's why she's drawn to Superman. Because now he's the one that is like more of the domineering figure.
Right. So they're kind of like equals because she's like
It's like
more
trichotomous.
trichotomous.
Yeah.
Meaning.
Because you got Clark Kent, Lois Lane, Superman.
Oh, okay.
It's dichotomous, but whatever.
Okay, so like, but like Superman, he's unmatched in like the physical like combat realm, but like Lois Lane is supposed to be completely unmatched in like social battles.
Sure.
Is the thing, and it just so they try to communicate that at the beginning with this like Antarctica scene, but it's a scene that always drives me crazy because it's her introduction. She walks on set and she gets mad for like literally no reason almost, and it's just like I mean it's not zero reason. She comes up and there's the military general doesn't shake her hand, which is super obscenely rude. But then she accuses but the other guy does. He shakes her hand, and then she's like, "Well, you two are just like comparing dicks or whatever." And it's like,
so the thing, So the thing to kind of set the premise is that she's shoving her way into a situation they don't want her in because she's a reporter and they're the military, and this is like a top secret. They're exploring like some alien craft out there.
Yeah.
And so they don't want a reporter out there spreading the story, but she does it anyway. She makes it through. And so the military general now realizes that he has to worry about a reporter, not only like to make sure that she doesn't kill herself out there because pretty dangerous wasteland, but also she's trying to get information, so he has to keep an eye on her to make sure that she's not picking something up he doesn't want her to.
Yeah.
So he's ticked off and doesn't shake her hand. The scientist does, because he's just kind of a more neutral character and is like, I don't mind you here, whatever. I'm just here to spread information. But she takes that in like a real, I don't know, kind of like male domineering way, especially with her language, her vernacular, because she comes in and she's like, let's just get it out of the way. I'm here because you weren't able to keep me out. So if we're done measuring dicks, then and I'm just like, you have to start off-putting, because even when a guy does that, it's off-putting. Like nobody likes this type of language. If you start off on that foot, like you're just not many people are gonna like you in a social setting.
Well, and
if she's supposed to be socially commandeering, like she would be a lot more intelligent about, or more tactful, I guess, about how she goes about that.
Yeah.
She's too direct and straightforward and just slapping people around rather than manipulating the situation.
Right.
So it doesn't feel reporter-ish, but it also doesn't feel Lois Lane-ish.
Yeah.
Because Lois Lane would be coming in and being like, look, I know you try to keep me out, but let's be honest. Like, I'm here to get a story. I'm going to get the story. Like, that feels like it'd be more natural.
Yeah,
and even though
she could be like, otherwise you can explain it this way and like present them an alternative that they hadn't thought about.
Sure.
That certainly makes it like, oh yeah, we kind of do need a reporter. She's right.
Some
That's
kind of manipulative
something she
compromise.
Would say. Yeah. She should like have addressed it that way because she comes across like, and this is where the modernization is. I don't like the sort of millennial stuff where it's like, I just come into a room and just like, like
get out of my way.
Yeah, I'm self-important. I hate the self-important stuff. And that's kind of how she comes across.
But it's very chip on the shoulder rather than plucky. So didn't work out.
Yeah.
And it's not for, I think that's the script, because Amy Adams does the best she can with it to give a Lois Lane edge, but it just didn't work out.
Yeah, it's the script really not understanding her character well enough.
Unfortunately. And it doesn't improve with the subsequent films. She just gets less and less relevant. But the other thing with Lois specifically in this, I don't think it's Antarctica because she's mentioned something about Canadian politics or something. So whatever borders it, I don't care. There's a scene in there where they're like, yeah, when the sun goes down, it drops to like -50 and it's pitch black out here. And she's like, okay. And then she waits until dark and sees Clark Kent climbing on this like super narrow ledge on this glacier, and she's like, what are you doing up there? I'm gonna follow you. It's like, you can't follow him, you're gonna die. But she somehow follows him in the pitch black -50 in this like basic parka that you'd wear in like New York City in early winter.
Yeah.
And it's like, no, you would have frozen to death or fallen to your death. It just was so unbelievable to get this moment between the two of them when they could have done it in a multitude of other ways. It was just kind of like, why did you choose this one? It stuck out so much. And then there, like at the end too, there was a scene where there's these two gods are fighting and just leveling this city.
Well, actually, let me say one more thing about that interaction, because Lois Lane, like you can see where that is them being like, well, Lois Lane, she's a go-getter and she doesn't let anybody get in her way. Yes, that's true. But she's not an idiot.
Right.
She wouldn't have gone out in negative 50-degree weather
Sure.
without being able to see.
Sure.
Like, she would have done something to like, it makes her appear foolish.
It would have been more
because-
interesting had she cornered Clark. 'Cause
Yeah.
maybe she saw him leaving, and that's all she saw, but she saw him leaving right before the sun went down or after it went dark or something.
Mm-hmm.
And then later she can be like, "What were you doing out there? I saw you leave last night. What were you doing?"
Yeah, and then he'd be like, I wasn't out there.
Like, "I saw
Yes,
you.
you
Here's
were."
some photo evidence or something."
Yeah, photo
like, kind of like
evidence.
manipulating
Pin him down. She
And
totally
then
would.
he realizes that he's got to avoid her, but she like eventually catches up to him or something, or forces him to save her out in the middle of the dark or something.
Yeah.
That's a lot more classically Superman for one,
Yeah.
because now he's like, because he does save her, but it's in this way she gets herself into trouble with this robot thing. It would have been a lot more interesting if he realizes that she's following him, but she's too far along for him to bring her back in like a natural way. Being
Mhm.
like, "Oh, I was just out here peeing. Let's go back." Like,
Uh-huh.
if she's far enough out where it's like, "Oh, it's dangerous," and if I get her back, she's gonna realize that I'm more capable than the average man. So now I just like, okay, well, you learn my secret. I guess you're coming with.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like that would have been a lot more of a Lois Lane feel rather than this like doing this thing that should not have been possible at all. And the thing is, like, you have a suspension of disbelief within films, right? But in the movie, they say, "You will not survive this." So, like, the movie has told me that this is not possible, and now the movie's trying to tell me that she did it. It's like, how? How did she do it? You have
Right.
not explained how this would be possible. Anyway,
Right. It's like, just don't address it, movie, and then we
Right.
can just be like, well, we don't know where this is, so
Sure.
who knows what the weather is like.
but the movie told me, so I was
But
like,
the movie
well,
told ya.
you dug this corner. I didn't do this.
Yeah.
But yeah, at the
Okay.
end too, same kind of thing. After they've not only gone through the city and brought down multiple buildings, they've gone up to space and then come back down, and it's like, hey, we have no idea where in the world these two would be at this point. They land back into Metropolis, which, okay, fine, sure, whatever, maybe that's believable. It's got to be miles away from where they started. There's just no way that it's not. And they're in this bank, and that's where he kills Zod, and then Lois just shows up. I'm like, how
From
did
within
you
the
get
bank.
here?
Not even from the front door. It's
Right.
like from as soon as you're already
Yeah.
inside.
I was like, how did you know? Like, you can't have known that this is where they were. But she somehow shows up, and it's like, I get the moment, but whatever.
No.
This is a total nitpick, but like, come on.
Yeah.
She didn't run for miles to this. Okay, so do you have anything else to add on that?
No, just these slight moments of implausibility of a little like, yeah,
a little out there.
all right.
So,
Yeah.
all right. So I'm gonna do a segment we've done before, and we'll close on this.
Okay.
This segment I've labeled "Tasteful Nudity" because
Oh,
this
here we
movie
go.
has it, and it's so great. This one's a lot more acceptable than Craven for sure, because Craven is just not acceptable at all.
Right.
But there's a scene in here where Clark is on a boat. He sees this oil rig on fire. He jumps in the water, gets onto the oil rig. Somehow, it's like the Hulk situation, kind of, when, he grows up and somehow his pants are always good to go.
Right.
He gets on and his shirt burns off. And somehow his pants are totally fine. It's like full pants. I'm like, okay, I get it. This guy clearly worked really, really hard to look this good, but it stays with it forever. They go to this helicopter, and he's like standing there shirtless, just flexing his heart out, and then this thing starts to fall. And he's like, I'll stop it. So he jumps and he grabs on, and this camera's like all up in his business. It's like, look at this man. Like, yeah, no, I saw him like for past 30 frames, but then he swims to shore and he's still shirtless. It's like running up.
Well, his shirt got burned off.
His shirt got burned off.
So it's gone.
What's he gonna do? It's just one of those Hollywood things. I got it.
Yeah.
At least it was semi-justified, but
Well, I mean, I liked that sequence. I thought it was tastefully done.
Tasteful. So tasteful.
I mean,
Well done, sir.
I don't know that it would be as satisfying of a movie without it. I'm trying to think of the right words. Because the thing is, this is Superman, it's not Craven. Nobody cares about the Craven character. And when they did that, we're just like, oh, like pulling off his shirt, and it was so lame. It was so lame because of the context of the movie, but it was also lame because it's like, who is this character?
Sure.
You're trying to make the character seem better. He's not better. He's lame.
It
And
made him worse, arguably.
we all know how lame he is. But with Superman, Superman's not lame. Superman's hot. So if Superman pulls his shirt off,
You heard it
kinda
here first,
just
folks.
give it in the audience what they came to
This
see.
is Mitch is the ideal man here.
I will have you know that I've not talked. I can't think of a single woman who's not liked this movie.
That's fair. I mean, the
Just saying.
guy looks good. I'll give him that.
Even my RN in college, because we watched it at a movie night at his place one time, and he was in the kitchen cooking, and then he came around and he was watching that scene where he comes out of the water, and he goes, "His peck is bigger than my head."
You know, the weird thing is, I remember when this movie came out specifically because of that scene.
Oh yeah.
When I was working on base, and I was talking to a Marine about it, and they were it was like 2 or 3 of them that had gone and seen it the night before. It was a midnight showing, I guess.
Okay.
And the guy was like, "Yeah, the movie's good. That guy worked hard for that." And I was like, "Wow." It's like, "You got something to tell me?" He's like, "No, man, you watch the movie, you'll understand what I mean." But I guess so. I went and did some research. I guess Henry Cavill, and this is a common practice within. I know this is surprising, but most of the physiques you see in Hollywood are not natural.
Oh, really?
Anyway, that is not
I'm shocked.
attainable without some illegal means. But he apparently dehydrated himself for like 3 days.
Whoa.
Like minimal to no water, just relieving himself of any excess weight at all to make sure that scene was good. like that is
Sheesh.
intense. Like props, but my gosh, dude, just like I'm gonna kill myself for this. Like, I'm gonna look good doing it though. Well done, Henry Cavill. You look great. Tasteful nudity.
Yeah.
Anyway, do you have anything else you want to say about the movie?
I have more to say about the tasteful nudity subject, but I'm sure
Oh.
that will come. No, that'll come another time. There'll be another day.
Okay, so not about this film. But
Not
just
about
in
this film,
okay.
just the subject in general. It's a fun segment.
It's
we're
a very
developing.
fun segment. I intend to continue it because there's some films out there that we're gonna definitely encounter.
It should have a scale of like, level of
ridiculous.
appropriate versus ridiculousness. It's a scale of appropriate and
Appropriate to ridiculous. Where would this line?
Well, this is on the more appropriate angle, I think.
It leans towards ridiculous. So if you got like a scale, it's like, if this is appropriate, it's like here.
Well, wait, we have to
Because-
define what's an appropriate use of it. Would it be like the examples we brought up in the past, like
Yeah.
with Blonde or whatever?
Yeah.
Well, okay, so because that's not. So hold on a second. Those are examples we brought up are justifiable nudity, but they're not like they're not for any titillation purposes.
No.
So you're saying if it's for
I
any
was
kind
disturbed in all those. I was like, I'm not appreciating anything right now. This is disturbing.
I'm saying, is there room for you in your scale to allow for something that is like pushing up on the tasteful nudity thing, but specifically for like just be like, wow, he's hot, or wow, she's gorgeous body.
I mean, I'm not into dudes myself, but I get what you're saying. So I'd say on this one, it is justified to some extent. It's obviously played for titillation, obviously. Like,
Yeah.
I understand
Right,
that.
right, right. But I'm just saying,
But
like,
I'm saying
is that
it's-
always a bad thing? Is my question.
No.
So
No.
in this case, I don't feel like it's a bad. I feel like
No, what I'm saying is that it's clearly like because of the titillation level, it leans towards the ridiculous. Whereas
Okay.
like I would say the appropriate scale is something like Blonde or Body Snatchers, where it's like this is doing something specifically for the narrative that is really nailing it home.
yes,
So it's no titillation at all,
right.
and it's not ridiculous. Like this actually fits
Yeah.
the narrative and the storytelling. This one, because it's like it is got some contrivance enough in there to be
It
like,
does have enough.
okay,
Yes.
this is leaning towards ridiculous, but it's still on the appropriate side of the scale. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Because it is justified. Like I get it,
Yeah.
but it does have some narrative relevance considering it is explaining like this is Superman. Like he's
Right.
going to have a physique that's like unattainable to the common human. So like I understand the purpose of it, but it isn't something that like pulls me out of the film entirely like the
Okay.
Craven scene did, you know?
Yeah.
Because the Craven thing was just like it almost felt
Well, the movie stopped.
it did,
Except not for a
hardcore.
Marvel moment, for this like weird, what are we doing?
There's
moment.
I forget who he's with, but Matt Damon is making fun of Matthew McConaughey because Matthew McConaughey famously likes to take his shirt off in movies, right?
Okay.
Specifically in his earlier career. But Matt Damon's making fun of him on an interview, and someone's like, "Someone tells me that you do a pretty good Matthew McConaughey impression." He goes, "Yeah, I can do that." He goes, "Hey, I like this movie and this scene, but I think now would be a good time to take my shirt off." and then subsequently that host shows it to Matthew McConaughey, and Matthew McConaughey gets a kick out of it. He starts cracking up. He's like, "That's pretty good."
He would.
But it was funny because like you know, because he was self-aware of it enough.
Yeah.
But Matthew McConaughey was making, or Matt Damon was making fun of the fact that he likes to take his shirt off because he's like, well, yeah, I work out and like I'm in the industry. Like this is something we do.
Right.
But it was some kind of self-awareness to it that kind of added a charm. It was like, all right, at least these guys admit it, you know, whatever. Like, yeah, I work out and I like to show off. Like, okay, at least you admit it. So that there's a level of that in this movie that I thought made it more acceptable. Whereas the Craven thing, it almost felt like the actor was like, do you understand how much work I put into this? Like, I'm taking my shirt off at some point, and they didn't have anywhere to do it. So he's like, I'm gonna do it here. I'm just gonna take it off. That's what
I'm just doing now.
Just like, get out of here. Like, that's what it was just, it was so ridiculous. It had nothing to do with the narrative.
I want to see the uncut version of Craven where it's like the scenes just prolong and like he just loses his shirt in like half of them. It's like every scene.
They're like, dude, stop taking it off.
And he just keeps doing it because he's like, I don't know how much they're going to cut out. So I got to just
somewhere this will work. Yeah, at least this felt more justified, but whatever.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's been our take on Man of Steel. You got anything else?
No.
All right.
It was a good movie.
Thanks for joining. It was a great movie.